in Psalm 58. I forgot to ask, does anyone need a handout? Tom? Okay, gotcha. This is the same handout that we've had the last couple of times. Psalm 58. This is one of those Psalms that is a difficult one to go through. This is one where David is summarized that he is calling down judgment. There is really not much positive that's happening through this psalm. He is praying for God to wipe people out. And it's very direct and in that sense, a rough psalm. But that's what David is asking for. And I think we can learn some lessons from this as we go through this psalm. A lot of times, and this is a good thing, we tend to think on our God being a merciful God. He is. And we think on our God being gracious and his love. And here we come into this passage where we're not seeing this. We're not seeing this forgiveness. And so it's a rough one. But there are some good points here, some good applications for us. So the first thing we looked at in this psalm was the true character of the wicked. We'll catch you up on your notes real quick. The true character of the wicked. So in these first 5 verses, which is where we're at right now, David he's just attacking verbally their character. He's showing how their motives are bad. They've been slandering. So this is some strong language. But the first thing we saw was they were cowardly in judgment. They're cowardly in judgment. Verse number 1, do your deeds speak righteousness, O congregation? Do you judge uprightly, you sons of men? And I'm not going to go back through the wording with all of this, but in the Hebrew, the wording here implies that some of them were doing this by silence. And some of you can probably do this. You can say a lot without saying anything. Sometimes our silence speaks volumes, and it's very, very loud. And here was a case where David is showing that people who should have been standing up for him, they're keeping silent. And by keeping silent, they're giving their consent to what the enemies are saying. So they're not opening their mouths when they should. And by that, they're hurting David. And that they were being cowards. And that's where I got the phrase for this one. The application statement on this first one, it's important that we view people as God does and not jump to conclusions or false accusations. It's important that we view people as God does and not jump to conclusions or false accusations. And this is what's going on with David. There are false accusations happening, and it's starting to snowball. So that's kind of the point we laid out, the first one there. Second point, there's an inner corruption. An inner corruption. Verse 2, yea, in heart you work wickedness. You weigh the violence of your hands in the earth. And we know the scriptures with out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. What is inside is what's going to come out. And here, notice the wording goes, it doesn't say you have wickedness in your heart. It says you're working wickedness. The idea there is it's like they're just conniving. They are trying to drum stuff up and be able to hurt David. They're working this thing. This isn't something where they slip and sin. They are working it, and they strongly desire to see David harm. Now, we see this with David. We can see it really, really clear here with him because we saw the slander happening. We saw the enemies after him. But this is like a foretaste, a small foretaste of what happened to our Lord, what happened to the Son of David, the Messiah. And we saw some ways that people had done the same thing to him. People in his day were claiming to be righteous. Remember the Pharisees. They had their act together. Everything was right. We know right and wrong. And you're of the devil. That's some harsh language. And they were just totally against, and they're slandering Jesus. And people just did that all during Jesus' ministry. They would slander, they would backbite, they would go against him. So we didn't just see it with David, we saw it with the Messiah. And we see it in our day. But your application statement, just for time, let's move on. The application statement there is we attempt to live for Jesus, persecution will often follow. Let's give the world the excuse they're looking for. I hope that makes sense, that statement, because too often what I've seen a number of people have more of the, let me just get along with everybody so I don't get persecuted. No, let's be serious about loving Jesus. And let's give people an excuse to come after us. Let's give them the excuse of being serious about Jesus so they have something to attack. And that's a positive thing. We need to give them that excuse. We need to stand up for our Lord. Last week, or week before, we looked at the constant wickedness, verse number 3. The wicked are estranged from the womb. They go astray as soon as they are born, speaking lies. They turn aside, they stray from the get-go. From the very beginning, the wicked are trying to hurt, they're trying to slander, they're doing wrong. So David is saying this is a constant thing with them. And your statement there, application statement. Followers of Jesus are no longer slaves to sin. We have the freedom to live righteously for Jesus. We must remember this when we're tempted to sin with our mouths. We don't have to. God has given us everything, that verse has been in my mind a lot. He's given us everything we need for life and for godliness. We have everything we need. We have no excuse. If you are a born-again follower of Jesus today, you have God himself indwelling you. I don't get that. I can't understand that concept. But he is. He indwells, he empowers. We have the freedom to call on him 24/7 for his help. And we need that 24/7. So that's what we saw with points A, B, and C. And that brings us tonight to point D. They're committed to cruelty. Committed to cruelty. So we're going to have a word of prayer, and then we'll start looking at our point. I'm going to ask some questions for you guys. If you want to slide up here, you can, unless you want to go real loud from back there, you can stay, okay? Your call. All right, let's pray and we'll get started. Father, thank you for your goodness. Thank you for loving us. I ask that you would help us tonight. Give us an understanding of your word. Help us to be able to take something from this passage and internalize it and use it. Would encourage, rebuke, do what needs to be done in each of our lives. Lord, I pray that you would help us to grow as a result of being here tonight. I pray that you would help us to be moldable and teachable. Father, I do pray and ask for your help. I pray you keep my words accurate. Help me not to be a distraction to the message that you desire to be delivered. And Lord, above all, would you please glorify yourself in some way tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, verses 4 and 5. They are committed to cruelty. Let's just read these two verses. Their poison is like the poison of a serpent. They are like a deaf adder that stops her ear, which will not hearken to the voice of charmers, charming never so wisely. Okay, kids, what kind of animals being talked about here? In those two verses. A snake. A snake. Exactly right. So we're talking about a snake here. What if I told you, some of you, I know somebody in here is going to kind of not like me using this illustration, but if I told you there's a poisonous snake crawling around on the floor in this room, what would you do? Move to the front. Would anybody want to get up on a chair? I can see a number of heads going. I have this paranoia about, not paranoia, with poisonous snakes, I get really nervous. The idea, maybe it's because I watch Westerns, but you always have in the Westerns, the snake bites the person and somebody's got to rush to get them to the doctor so they don't die. And everything's about that rattlesnake and the danger it causes. And it's a scary thing. But if you know that something is going around in here, and using this example, what kind of a snake do you think he's referring to when he's talking about these charmers? What kind of snake charm? It's charm. A cobra. Those things are nasty. Those snakes are deadly. And that's the example that David here is bringing up. And if we start saying, yeah, there's one of these snakes crawling around in this room, you're going to get up, you're going to want to move and get away from this thing. You're going to be paying attention to it because you don't want to get hurt. Now, we know that the snakes, they have poison, right? They have a poison their venom is poisonous. So let's just, for sake of a few minutes, let's just look at this idea of the poison. What kind of how would this poison that David is talking about, he's relating this to a person. This isn't just talking about snakes. What is the poison that will get in people's lives? What is the way you could describe that would cause this speech issues, the backbiting? Yes. Okay, that tongue can be really evil, and that tongue shoots out that poison, doesn't it? It can be, it's a fiery weapon. It's an ugly weapon. It cuts. What's usually behind it? When we start wanting to yak about somebody, what's usually behind that? What's the motive behind that often? Okay, they may want like maybe some guilt or things like that. Get it off of yourself. Try to direct the attention to someone else. What else? Okay, that's the outcome of it. And that's, we do that often. And I don't know about you. I know I can do that without saying a word. I can show total disrespect for somebody and I can be nasty to people and never say anything. Anybody else got that?
If you've been hurt.
And that comes from an attitude, doesn't it? That's a good example. Thank you. We can get this, and let me just give you a couple of words here. When people start getting bitter, you see a tendency to want to run our mouths and do that. The anger that pops up, this is like a poison that is working in people's lives that helps them to want to do that slandering and this lying and that disrespect that you're mentioning. These things it's like a poison that not only affects you, but then you bring it out, it affects others. Now, what does poison do to people? Okay, it can make them sick. It can keep on going and it can kill them. There's a reason that in these two verses, David is saying their poison is just like the poison of a serpent. It's going to make you sick. It's going to kill you. And you see, there's some of these poisons, like when a snake bites or a spider bites, it paralyzes part of your body. Can that not happen in our lives in the sense of paralyzing your usefulness, paralyzing you know, if you have the impact you want to have? These people, he's saying their poison is just like the poison of a snake. And if you look at the next part of that verse, or verse 5, they won't listen to the voice of the charmers. They won't allow someone, and again, using that example of the charmer, to calm them down. They won't let someone speak rationally and logically and help them. They won't let people bring the scriptures into their lives. There's a phrase that has been used before, as I've seen some churches having to do discipline on people. There's a phrase called, it's in scriptural phrase, they set their face like a flint. They are determined, I'm going to go this way no matter what you say. I'm going to do what I want to do. And that's when discipline has to come. Because they won't come away from following after their sin. And that's the picture that we have here. These people will not listen to others coming along, trying to counsel, trying to help them. That's the charming that he's talking about here. They are intent on destroying other people. These are the ones that were after David. This is what's going on in his life. And we can see it here with David. They tried to intercede and get these people to back off so that David wouldn't have them trying to kill him. Now, with David, we know eventually it didn't work. How do we know that? What happened in David's life? Where did he get to? Eventually. He became king, didn't he? These people that are trying to stop him, the people that were trying to kill him. Perfect example, when Saul was after him and saying things and spreading rumors, then it happens again and again. It happened multiple times in his life, but they were eventually put down. They were eventually stopped. But how did this work out when we see the son of David, Jesus? Did Jesus have these people slandering, trying to harm him, trying to kill him? The same thing happened to Jesus. Did we see anybody try, like David's talking about with the charming, to stop them and counsel them, don't do this? Did we see any examples of that? Somebody tell me. Give me one. Okay, Jesus spoke for him. Jesus would say things and teach. Yes. That's right. Pilate's wife was one who jumped into that. She made it clear. It didn't happen. Who else? I mean, even if you go with that way, even Pilate. I don't find any fault with this guy. He's innocent. And they said, if you let him go, you're not a friend of Caesar. I tried to tell the Jewish leaders, you know, there's nothing wrong with him. And he was weak-kneed. I get it. He went and did it anyways, but he tried to rationalize with those guys, charm them. They didn't listen. Who else tried to do that? Do you remember any others? I had an advantage. I wrote a few down, so I was ahead of it. Yes. That's right. People on the cross is a good example. Remember Nicodemus? He came back after he had talked with him. He came back and he told those who were after Jesus, does our law find, I think that's the one, does our law not cure a man? I'm just forgetting how the verse goes. Help me out. Before we condemn him, we have, you hear him and you say, you guys aren't even listening to him. You're just making up your mind he's guilty. He tried to come out and say, you got to listen. And he tried to reason with them. They wouldn't listen to him. People tried to listen. And again, using the wording of this verse, they tried to charm never so wisely. Did it work? No. They killed him. They killed him. The people would not heed the message. Their poison, their hatred, their bitterness, it was strong. And they wouldn't be taught. That jealousy they had was strong. What about us? Do we ever see this happen in our lives today? Do we ever see this bitterness? And you look at, we think back to what with Jesus. Was there anything that was there any legitimate reason they had to be bitter at Jesus? He had done nothing to them. There are times, David, we looked at in Sunday school this morning, there were some reasons for some people to be bitter with him. He did some really atrocious actions. He had some sins that needed to be dealt with. It was bad. Jesus did nothing. Are there times in our lives when we have people who will show this bitterness and this anger towards us as Christians for stands that we take? Here, this is not intended to be a harsh thing when I say this, so please don't take it that way. Sometimes people aren't bitter with us and are not upset with us because we're just like them. If we are like the world has no reason to hate us. But when we are following Jesus, it will at times, not always, in our culture, it'll at times, as we stand for Jesus, it has caused them to hate us just because of what we're standing for. I can think of a couple of examples of media where I've got people, I don't think I've talked with them hardly. And when I have said things to them, hi, good morning, but they know who I am, they know what I stand for, I talk with other people regarding the gospel, and it has just generated a hatred in these people. They're people. And this venom, this comes through, and in their case, it's just like here, it comes through with slander, it comes through with the words. Yes. Yes. And that's a good example. That's a very good example. We at the breakfast yesterday, one of the things, just in conversation that was going around, someone had brought up that there was a group that was protesting down at Bob Jones, and they had, it was homosexual, and the president at the time, what he did was he went out in front of the school, marching, picketing against the school. So the president had food and water and all this was taken out from the dining common and went out and fed them all. And he just showed love to it. It's like, what do you do? How can you keep up this bitterness when somebody's showing active love to you? And that's exactly what we should be doing. That's a good example. This can get ugly. It can get extremely ugly because here's what happens. People like to advance their cause. People are very excitable. They like that they want you to agree with them, and if you don't, they will become aggravated, angry, bitter, and these things happen. And that's when this venom starts to flow. That's when we start having some of these issues. And really, it all comes down, and I don't care if it's in a Christian or not Christian, it all comes down to one problem. I want my way, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm going to do whatever I got to do, and it's a self-driven thing. And that's what happens in people's lives. And when bitterness does set in, it's just hard to get people to want to listen. I guess my challenge for us on this point would be, let's be careful that make sure this can't be said of us in the church. It shouldn't be said of us. This kind of thing should not be happening in the church. Now, we have safeguards for this. Jesus set up safeguards, and it's called church discipline. When we see people who are showing this bitterness and they're not willing to be reconciled, we start down this road. And it's not I'm going to get you. It's you at your spiritual restore such a one in the spirit of meekness. That's what we are to do. That's who we are to be. So we got to make sure that we're not wanting this within the church. Never should it be a part of our lives. So your application statement here. Let's ask the Lord to help us drain our poison glands. And let's be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. Our Lord continually helps us. He desires for his children, his followers, he desires for us to walk worthy. He's told us, walk worthy of the vocation we were called. He desires us to walk worthy of him. We need to submit to his leading. We need to submit to following him. Okay, that brings us to our second point, the condemnation of the wicked. Condemnation of the wicked. This first section we looked at, verses 1 through 5. The first section of this psalm, it shows what the wicked are like. Now, in this section, this is where David starts praying for their destruction. He wants them put down. So, Let's look first of all at this. He wants to cause their power to depart. He wants to cause their power to depart. Verse number 6. David, did you get the powerful? Verse number 6. Break their teeth, O God, in their mouth. Break out the great teeth of the young lions, O Lord. I don't know about you. This, for me, this is one of those phobias that I get paranoid about. The idea of being in an accident or falling off of something and breaking teeth. That is something I've never done, and I don't want to do it. I have done face plants on concrete, and I've had some that loosened a little bit, but I've never had one snap. And that concept of breaking a tooth, it is just terrifying to me. And that's one that bothers me. This is, but David has this. Score on this way. David in this verse, where it says break their teeth. Okay, young people, what was the animal he was talking about? Well, before that, in verse 5, what animal was he talking about? Huh? A snake. So if you with the snake, if you break that what is the snake's tooth called? Remember? Fangs. Oh, look at the children over here. Okay. You got the fangs. He's saying break that fang. Break the thing. He wants that snake to be disabled. He doesn't want it to have. He doesn't want these people to have that ability to sink in their venom anymore. So he's saying break these things. Defang these people who are attacking so that they can't spread their poison anymore. Now, maybe it's, break the thing and let the poison drip in their own mouth. Let them be the ones that get a taste of what they're giving out. But here's the thing he's saying: stop them from making these attacks. That's what he wants. That's the defang them in the first part of this verse. And then Peanut will take yours. He changes his analogy, doesn't he? He says, break out the teeth of what? The lions. Now it says young lions. You ever seen a YouTube thing of little lions that are just cute and they're adorable? The little what do you call them? Little cubs. Thank you. You see these little ones, you just want to pet them. That's not what this is. The young lions is as opposed to the old ones, the ones who are getting past their prime. He said these young lions, these are the ones that are in their prime. These are the ones that are rough, and they're the fighters. He's saying, God, break out the fangs in them. Make it so that they can't tear apart their prey anymore. Take away their power. That's what David is praying for these people who are attacking him. Take away their power. Now, again, that's what David desired, and eventually David got it. Those who were against him, those who were trying, remember Saul. What did Saul try to do to David? Tell me one thing he tried to do to him. I'm helping you. Kill him how? With a spear. He tried to take a javelin through him. Remember, wanted to pin him to a wall. That was just one of them. He tried to stop David. David eventually had his oppressors put down. David was made king. He had victory. Jesus experienced this. Were Jesus' enemies put down and silenced? That's a loaded. Anybody? Got a yes? What did you say, Al? Okay, so I answered it this way: yes and no. Because no, they're still going. Do we still have enemies of Jesus mouthing off and saying all kind of things? Do we still? Now, the place I would say yes is Jesus had his heel bruised, didn't he? What happened to Satan? His head was crushed. He was defeated. He is a defeated foe. There is no power. He doesn't have the power to control anything. He can tempt, he can do things like that, but he is a defeated foe. He's done for. So in that sense, yes, there was victory that happened. But is he still the God of this world? Roaming where he wants to roam and doing not where he wants and how he wants. He's still under God's control, but he is the God of this world, and he's wreaking all kinds of havoc still. So yes, he was defeated, but no, that's the problems are still going on. This was they temporarily have succeeded in killing Jesus, and then he rose. And that's where our power comes in. Jesus rose. They were not. Their victory was very short-lived. Jesus rose. He defeated death, and one day he's coming back, and he's gonna set up shop. And he's going to reign, and he's going to rule, and every knee will bow. Every knee's going to bow. Whether they think they will or not, every knee is going to bow to Jesus. But for now, at this point in time, it looks like the evil's winning sometimes. In the grand scheme, they're not. But it can appear this way. Now, let me just ask this. What about in our lives? What about in our lives? Does God break the power of evil people to protect us? Again, this is a little bit loaded. Okay, he breaks their power. So, if that's the case, how do we explain people who are being martyred today? Do they still have power to affect believers? Now, I agree with your answer, yes. But it's also a no. Okay. I think so. As persecution happens, the people doing the persecution, they're being affected as well. Is that what you're saying? Okay. And that's absolutely right. You would hope so. You would hope so. And we can't see that. I will say this. Those who are doing this persecution, those who are who are martyring people, and again, I'm trying to look at this as far as like globally. What we have in this little culture of ours is not the norm for the world. This is not how things operate everywhere else. There are people who, if you name the name of Christ, if you take a stand for him, you're on a hit list. And it's a reality. But here's the point, and that would have been the case in Jesus' time. You become a follower of Christ, you're on a hit list. And we saw that happen. We're seeing that happen as we're going through Acts. But here's the thing with this. We may never, even though we may be persecuted to some degree, that may happen, and we may never get vindication. We may never see those who are evil and those who hate Jesus, who may be persecuting us. We may never see the outcome of God taking care of them. We may never see it. But I'll tell you what, one day we put off this flesh. One day we stand before it. One day that we'll be able to say it was worth it. And it will be. And we can have that satisfaction now, knowing that if what we have here is it, then what it cost them of all men most miserable. This is it. This is more of it. We know we have a confident expectation of being with Jesus. And one day we will. Jesus will vindicate. Jesus will make everything right. Everything will be brought to light. Everything will be made correct. Jesus is going to do this for us, but not necessarily now. And we may not see it. That's what he is asking for in these verses is Lord, to break them, break their power, stop them from doing this stuff. Your application statement on this: if God is in control, we can trust him. Let's live with an eternal perspective. God is in control and we can trust him. Let's live with an eternal perspective. That's one thing. It's easy to say that. It's easy to say live with this eternal perspective, but it's easier to say than it is to do. Because we are in this here and now. And this is not something that I use this word specific. It's not, it doesn't come natural to live for the eternal. The natural is to live for the here and now. That's just where we're at. For us to be doing this, you've got to actively remind yourself consistently of the gospel. We need to be having look what Jesus did for us. Look what he's doing for us. We need to keep reminding ourselves of Jesus and what he has done and is doing in our lives. As we think on that, as we remember what he is doing for us now, that brings glory. He is exalted by that, and we are strengthened by that. We need to call on him to help us. In our flesh, we do zip. It's going to be positive. We need his power to help us. We need to call on him on a regular basis. Something I brought up again at the breakfast yesterday, and I don't remember the concept, but you may remember to help me with this. But the comment was something to the effect of, how can we do this? How can we live a godly life? And the answer was, it's impossible. In my flesh dwells no good thing. We don't do things in our power. We need God helping us. We need God's power working through us. As we submit to him, we can live lives that are pleasing to him. That's what he desires. Us yielding, us following. That's what we have to do. Okay. Any comments before we close tonight? Yes. Please. Right. I was reading recently, we've all got a place that needs to be filled in our lives. And people are going to try to fill that void with something. And the only thing that fits that hole is Jesus. And we would do everything in our power. People will try to fill it with the money. They'll try to fill it with pleasure. They try to fill it with whatever it is that's they think is going to gratify them. They try to fill it with that. And you're right. Jesus is what they need. Anyone else? Okay. So let's have a word of prayer and we'll be dismissed. Father, thank you again for your goodness. Lord, thank you for this brief time we've had tonight. I just ask that you would help us to be serious-minded about following you, about living for you. I ask that you would help us this week to depend on and to rely on you. Lord, show us your power. Show us how you can work and what you're doing. And give us opportunity to share with each other the blessings you're providing and the things you're giving. But make your ways very clear to us. Help us to be submissive to you. Protect us as we go home. Pray you just give us a profitable week in which you would be glorified by. You're dismissed.